This one is actually much harder, and believe it or not, it requires factoring. She only wants you to touch the left side, but I'm going to touch the right side just to show you where we're going here. If you look at the right side, suddenly you have to remember that you learned how to factor. You also have to use this a few times. Look down below. We have sine squared. It's got a -1 multiplying it in front of it, but it's essentially sine squared in the brackets. So if I were to put that -1 in front and put brackets like this, I can replace that sine squared. We're not going to in the end. I just want to show you what this can be made simplified so that you can see it. And then I'm going to bring this back, but it's the only way you can see it. So if I replace what's in the bracket, we learned down here that sine squared plus cos squared is equal to 1. And a very common one, sine squared is equal to 1 minus cos squared. Now we're going to use that on the left side a few times too. So keep that in mind. So there we go. If sine squared is equal to that, we can replace it wherever we see it. Now keep in mind we're going to replace it on the right side. And now I'm going to multiply that -1 back into it. That -1 back into it. -1 times 1 is -1. -1 times minus cos squared is positive cos squared. So suddenly we're going to get cos squared -1 when I put that -1 back into it. So we get rid of that -1 and we get cos squared -1. Well, this is where our factoring comes in. So our cos squared -1 is the same as x squared -1. And this is where factoring, this is why I said you got to get good at all this stuff to do all these questions. Because if I just say, okay, let my replace cos theta with x, which is the letter x. So wherever I see it, so here's cos squared. So I'm going to replace it with x squared. And there's no other cos, so it's just -1. Well, x squared -1 can be factored into x plus 1 and x minus 1. I'll give lots of room beside the x. Well, I replaced the cos theta with x, so now I'm going to replace it back because I'm all done with it. So I'm going to place the cos theta back. So since I let x be cos theta for a little while, now I'm going to let cos theta come back to x. So that means the bottom is the same as this. Cos theta plus 1, cos theta minus 1. That's the whole bottom. Now keep in mind, that's what I had to do. What did I have to do? I had to replace my sine squared with 1 minus cos squared. And then I had to factor it into cos plus 1, cos minus 1. And if you're not sure, expand it. Cos times square, cos is cos squared. Minus cos plus cos, they nullify, minus 1. You get cos squared minus 1, which is the same as minus sine squared. But remember, we're not going to alter the right. I'm just showing you how we can figure out how to get there. So that means, remember, I had to convert this to cos squared to get there. And then I had to factor it. Now, up top, you'll discover there's a cos in common with both of them. That means you can factor out a cos from both of them. And if you take cos squared and divide it by cos, you get cos. And then if you get cos and divide it by cos, you get 1. So you get cos times cos x plus 1. And if you're not sure, you can expand it and discover that it does indeed. This becomes cos squared, and this becomes plus cos. So it does indeed. Now notice we have two factors in common. This is important to remember, that we get rid of those factors in common. We cancel them out. So later on, when we want to match the right side, we're going to have to remember that. So I'm going to keep it on the right side, but they cancel out. And I'm left with this. This is a lot simpler to try to see on the left side now. The left side also requires factoring, but I'm just trying to see if the left side meets the right side. So we're good on this. That's what the right side simplifies to. Cos x, and I'll get rid of this ugly thing, divided by cos x minus 1. Let's see if we can make the left side match that. Let's see if we can make the left side match that. Well, let's start with the bottom here. The bottom, that sine squared, again, can be replaced with 1 minus cos squared. 1 minus cos squared. It's a little bit messy, this cos squared, but that's okay. And then I have plus 3 cos minus 3. And if I look at my numbers, I got 1 here, minus 3. That makes minus 2. So I'll just slap the minus 2 over here. You're allowed to group like items. And then I can see that there's a minus in front of this co-squared. And generally when I'm factoring, I don't like minus. So I'm going to divide everything by -1 and put the -1 in front. If I divide everything by -1, I get co-squared minus 3 cos plus 2. So I get co-squared. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. Minus 3 cos plus 2. Well, let's do our little trick where we let cos equal to x. If we look carefully at x squared minus 3x plus 2, that's factorable. That's factorable. That's just a normal factor. Remember, I'm letting let x be cos, and just put, wherever I see cos, I put x. So x squared minus 3x plus 2. Well, that's factorable. What multiplies up to plus 2, but that is up to minus 3? Those are the factors -1 and -2. So that means x squared minus 3x plus 2 can be factored to this. X minus 1, x minus 2. And then we're going to replace it again. We're going to replace that x with the cos. We're going to bring on the cos back. There we go. So that means that whole bottom, and don't forget there's a -1 in front. That means this whole bottom here is really, and I'm going to just get rid of this because we don't really need it other than the sine squared plus cos squared. That means this whole bottom here is replaced with this. And I didn't do a good job of bringing the top in properly. The whole top is over here. There we go, and I'll just get rid of this other stuff over here. There we go. Now the top, you'll see a sine squared again. Now keep in mind that my bottom is my right side is this. So now we're going to work on the top. The top is a sine squared again. I'm going to replace that with 1 minus cos squared. 1 minus cos squared. And then I got plus 2 cos and -1. Now notice I have 1 minus 1. 1 minus 1. So they disappear. Now I have minus cos squared plus 2 cos. I'm going to factor out a minus cos, which means I'm going to divide each by minus cos. And I'm left with cos x minus 2, right? If I factor out a cos x. If you don't believe me, expand it. You'll see it makes minus cos squared plus 2 cos. So that means the top here can be replaced with this. And then instantly you'll see that this minus cos is multiplying this factor, and this down here matches this factor. So they can both cancel. Then notice this has a -1 in front, multiplying it, and this has a -1 in front. So they can both cancel. Now suddenly we can see that our left matches our right. So I've proven it, except your teacher doesn't let you change the right. How do we get back to the right? Well, we have to do the same things how did we get here? Well, we had to factor out cos times cos. So that means I'm going to, on the left side, now that I've simplified it to this, pretend I've left my right side alone. I'm going to multiply it top and bottom by, I believe it was cos plus 1, top and bottom, and cos plus 1. Top and bottom. When you multiply something top and bottom by the same thing, you actually aren't changing it at all. You aren't changing it at all. But let's expand it. I get cos squared plus cos. Great. I'm matching the right side. That's what my top would be. If I multiply my left top and bottom, it makes that. Cos squared plus cos. Almost there. What about this one? Well, cos squared times cos squared, or cos times cos is cos squared, plus 1 cos minus 1 cos minus 1. think I forgot a minus somewhere here. Cos minus 1. Multiplying top and bottom by cos. Okay, well, let's just see how we get. When I get the bottom, I get cos squared. Ah, that's right. I get cos squared minus 1. Well, that's not equal to sine squared. Sine squared is 1 minus cos squared. This is cos squared minus 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to factor a negative 1 out of it. We're going to factor a negative 1 out of it, which means I'm going to divide both these things, which have a positive 1 and a negative 1, I'm going to divide both of them by negative 1. This becomes negative cos squared, and this becomes positive 1. And because I factored out a negative 1, I have to put a bracket and put the negative 1 in front. If you don't believe it, expand it. I get plus cos squared minus 1, which is what we started with. Now you can rearrange this. Minus cos squared plus 1 is the same as 1. You're allowed to rearrange anything that's being added. It's the same as 1 plus 1 minus cos squared, or just 1 minus cos squared. Well, I can see that 1 minus cos squared is the same as sine squared. And I can see that there's a minus 1 in front of it. And now my left side matches my right side without changing it. But it's hard to see unless you fiddle with the right to get it down to this and then say, okay, I've got to multiply top and bottom by cos plus 1. Impossible to see unless you factor the right side. Your teacher's being kind of cruel. We were allowed to factor both sides until they matched and to figure it out. So this is an impossible step that almost no student will ever figure out.